First ever in history, French Gendarmerie Nationale changing of the guard at BUCKINGHAM Palace. Lieutenant Camille Durand sat in her modest office at the headquarters of the Gendarmerie Nationale, carefully reviewing a stack of ceremonial protocols. Camille was no stranger to discipline, precision, or the weight of tradition. She had joined the gendarmerie with a sense of duty and pride, but in the quiet moments of reflection, she sometimes wondered if she would ever experience something truly historic. Little did she know, that day's announcement would answer that question in a way she had never imagined. The phone rang, breaking the soft hum of the office. Camille picked it up and heard the familiar, formal voice of Colonel Lefebvre, her superior. "Lieutenant Durand," he said, his tone carrying a mixture of pride and excitement, "you and your unit have been selected for a first-ever event. The French gendarmerie will perform the changing of the guard at Buckingham Palace in London." For a moment, Camille simply sat there, staring at the phone. The words seemed unreal. Buckingham Palace, London, the changing of the guard. These were not just routine duties, they were centuries-old traditions, symbols of history and discipline. And now, France was being invited to participate, a historic first. The significance of the announcement was not lost on her. This was more than a ceremonial performance. It was a bridge between nations, a moment of international recognition. Camille hung up the phone and let herself breathe for the first time in hours. Pride surged through her veins, but it was accompanied by a flicker of anxiety. The honor was immense, but the responsibility was equally overwhelming. She would not only represent the Gendarmerie Nationale, but also her country, her team, and herself. Every step, every salute, every movement would be scrutinized by not only her colleagues, but the world. Immediately, preparations began. Camille knew that a successful performance required more than just perfect timing and polished uniforms. It demanded understanding, teamwork, and deep respect for the traditions of the host nation. She spent hours reviewing videos of previous changing of the guard ceremonies at Buckingham Palace, analyzing the movements of the guards, the precision of their steps, the rhythm of the drums, and even the way they carried themselves. She took meticulous notes, marking every detail that could help her team achieve perfection. Back in Paris, the atmosphere in the training grounds was electric. The selected officers, a mix of experienced veterans and younger recruits, gathered for the first briefing. Camille addressed them with calm authority, though her heart raced with anticipation. "This is a historic moment for all of us," she began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "We are not just performing a ceremony. We are representing France, our traditions, and our dedication. Every movement we make will be noticed. Every gesture will speak for us." The officers listened intently, some nodding with excitement, others with visible nervousness. None of them had experienced anything like this before. Many had participated in national events in France, parades in Paris, or ceremonial duties at local institutions, but nothing matched the significance of performing at Buckingham Palace. The very idea of marching alongside the iconic British Guards in front of the world's cameras was awe-inspiring. Training sessions began in earnest. Early mornings turned into long days of practice, each movement repeated dozens of times until it became instinctive. Camille insisted on precision, but also encouraged her team to remain flexible. The gendarmerie had its own traditions, its own style of ceremonial display, and part of their challenge was integrating their methods with the strict protocols of Buckingham Palace. There were moments of frustration. Some steps felt awkward, some timings did not align, and there were heated discussions about how best to execute the ceremony without losing their identity. Yet, through every challenge, Camille's leadership shone. She balanced discipline with encouragement, correcting mistakes with patience and praise with sincerity. She reminded her team that mistakes were part of learning, but pride, dedication, and teamwork would carry them through. Slowly but surely, the officers began to move as one. Their footsteps grew in sync, their salutes precise, and their confidence blossomed. Outside the training hall, the city of Paris seemed to buzz with excitement. Camille took a quiet moment to walk along the Seine, reflecting on the journey ahead. She thought about the centuries of history embedded in both France and Britain, the complex relationship between the two nations, and the honor of being chosen to represent her country on such a prestigious stage. She realized that this was not just about ceremony, it was about diplomacy, respect, and connection. Every step she and her team would take in London was a gesture of friendship, a symbol of unity through discipline and tradition. As the days passed, the team's preparations grew more intense. Uniforms were inspected meticulously, boots polished to a high shine, and ceremonial rifles checked repeatedly. Camille worked closely with each officer, offering guidance, reassurance, and motivation. She reminded them that the eyes of the world would be upon them, but that fear could be transformed into focus and determination. She herself felt the weight of expectation, yet she refused to let it paralyze her. Instead, she channeled it into preparation, planning every detail and imagining the ceremony unfolding perfectly in her mind. The moment of departure finally arrived. The officers boarded the plane to London, carrying not only their gear but the hopes and pride of an entire nation. Camille sat quietly, reviewing her notes one last time, feeling the hum of excitement mixed with a touch of nervous anticipation. She thought about the countless hours of training, the challenges overcome, and the responsibility that lay ahead. She also thought about the history they were about to make, the story that would be told for years to come. The first time in history that the French gendarmerie had performed the changing of the guard at Buckingham Palace. As the plane touched down in London, Camille felt a surge of emotion. The city was alive with energy, the streets lined with tourists, the air buzzing with expectation. She looked at her team, each officer poised and ready, and felt a deep sense of pride. Together they had trained, prepared, and envisioned this moment. Now it was real. The next steps they took would not only be ceremonial, they would be historic. Even in those quiet moments before the official rehearsal, Camille sensed the significance of what lay ahead. The palace gates, the iconic guards in their red tunics and bearskin hats, the ceremonial music. It was all so grand, so symbolic. She reminded herself to breathe, to focus, and to trust in her team. This was not just a performance. It was a story of dedication, tradition, and international friendship. And for Camille Durand, it was the beginning of a chapter in her life that she would never forget. The journey from Paris to London was more than a physical trip. It was a passage into history, a test of courage, skill, and unity. As Camille walked through the palace grounds for the first time, she felt the weight of centuries pressing down on her shoulders. Yet instead of fear, she felt determination, pride, and a deep sense of purpose. This was what she had trained for, what her team had prepared for, and what France had entrusted them to accomplish. Camille looked at the officers beside her, each one reflecting the same mix of nerves and excitement. She knew that the real challenge was just beginning, but she also knew that they were ready. Together, they would make history, not through grand gestures or speeches, but through the precision of their movements, the discipline of their formation, and the respect they carried in every step. The first-ever French gendarmerie changing of the guard at Buckingham Palace was about to begin, and Camille Durand was at the heart of it, ready to lead her team into history. The journey from Paris to London was filled with a mix of excitement and nervous anticipation. Lieutenant Camille Durand and her team sat quietly on the train from the airport to central London, observing the city as it passed by. London was unlike anything they had seen before. The streets were busy with people, buses painted in bright red, and the historic buildings lining the Thames exuded an air of old-world charm. Camille took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart. She knew that the coming days would test her team in ways they had never experienced before. Arriving at their assigned quarters near Buckingham Palace, the officers were greeted with formal smiles and nods from British officials. There was an undeniable sense of curiosity in the air. After all, the French gendarmerie had never performed this ceremony here before. The palace, with its grand gates and regal presence, loomed over them, reminding Camille of the significance of their task. Every detail mattered, from posture to timing, from uniform to expression. The weight of history pressed down, but it also inspired determination. The first rehearsal was scheduled for the following morning. Camille gathered her team in a small practice hall provided by the palace staff. The room was modest, yet it carried the weight of preparation for an event that would be seen around the world. Camille stood before her officers, her eyes scanning each face to gauge their readiness. "Remember," she said, her voice calm but firm, "we are guests here, but we carry the pride of France. Respect every detail, every movement, and every tradition. Watch carefully, follow precisely, and move as one." The rehearsal began. At first, the officers struggled to match the pace and rhythm of the British guards. Even minor mistakes were magnified under the watchful eyes of the palace officials. A misaligned step here, a slight pause there, and it felt as though the entire formation faltered. Camille could feel her own nerves rising, but she pushed them aside. She moved among her team, gently correcting positions, adjusting angles, and offering reassurance. Her focus was not only on the ceremony itself, but on instilling confidence in her officers. Time and again, they practiced. Camille reminded herself that even the most experienced soldiers needed repetition to master something unfamiliar. She also noticed subtle cultural differences in the way commands were given and followed. The gendarmerie had its own style, precise and disciplined, but slightly different from the British routines. Finding the balance between maintaining their identity and respecting the palace protocols was challenging. Some officers became frustrated, voices raised in the quiet space, but Camille's steady guidance helped calm the tension. Outside the rehearsal hall, the palace grounds were alive with anticipation. Tourists began gathering, curious to see what this historic collaboration would look like. News crews and photographers were already setting up their cameras, capturing every angle of the grand gates and the meticulous arrangements of the palace staff. The presence of the French gendarmerie added a layer of international significance, and Camille felt the importance of making a strong first impression. She reminded her team that the world would be watching, but fear could be turned into focus and determination. The officers worked tirelessly, often practicing for hours without pause. Camille made sure that no one was left behind, checking on each individual, correcting minor mistakes, and encouraging them to keep moving forward. She knew that confidence came from preparation, and preparation came from patience, persistence, and attention to detail. Slowly, the team began to synchronize their movements. The steps that once seemed awkward began to feel natural, and the officers started to move as a single unit, their faces calm, their posture straight, and their eyes focused. Even with progress, challenges continued. The British guards, though polite, observed every rehearsal with a careful eye. They noted differences in stance, timing, and spacing. Camille realized that part of their task was not only to perform well, but also to earn respect through precision and professionalism. She encouraged her officers to observe the British guards closely, to understand their movements, and to blend their own techniques where appropriate. It was a delicate dance of adaptation, learning, and mutual respect. The pressure of performing in front of history was compounded by the unfamiliar surroundings. The palace grounds were immense, and the echo of every step seemed louder than expected. Camille noticed that even the smallest misstep carried weight, and she reminded her team to stay calm. "Focus on your movements, on the rhythm on each other," she said. "Forget the cameras, forget the crowd, trust yourselves, trust your training, you are ready." As the days passed, the team grew stronger. Rehearsals became smoother and mistakes less frequent. Camille watched with quiet pride as her officers began to embody the discipline and elegance required for the ceremony. She knew that the real test would come during the official rehearsal in front of palace dignitaries, when every movement would be observed and evaluated. Yet, despite the pressure, the team's morale remained high. There was a sense of camaraderie, of shared purpose, and of being part of something historic. Camille also took time to reflect on the personal significance of the experience. She thought about her own journey in the gendarmerie, the years of dedication, training, and sacrifice. This opportunity was the culmination of her efforts, a chance to show the world what the French gendarmerie could achieve. She felt a mix of pride and humility, understanding that while the event was about performance, it was also about diplomacy, culture, and connection. Each step taken on the palace grounds would be a symbol of friendship between nations. The official rehearsal day arrived. The palace was busier than ever, with officials, media, and onlookers gathering to witness the first-ever performance by the French gendarmerie. Camille's team stood in formation, their uniforms polished, rifles gleaming, and faces composed. Camille herself felt a wave of nervous excitement. She had spent countless hours preparing her team, and now it was time to see if all the effort would pay off. As the ceremony began, every officer moved with precision. The steps were measured, the salutes exact, and the rhythm of the formation steady. Camille's eyes scanned the team, noting the subtle coordination that marked their improvement. The British guards watched silently, expressions neutral, yet Camille could sense their acknowledgement of the French officer's skill. The first few minutes passed without incident, and a sense of accomplishment began to wash over Camille. The months of preparation, the long hours, the challenges, and the doubts, all of it had led to this moment. Despite minor hiccups, a step slightly off here, a pause slightly late there, the overall impression was remarkable. The officers had adapted to the palace routines while maintaining the distinct style of the French gendarmerie. Camille allowed herself a small smile, proud of her team's perseverance and professionalism. She knew that these first steps were more than ceremonial. They were a statement of capability, respect, and international friendship. After the rehearsal, Camille gathered her officers. They were tired, but their eyes shone with pride. "You have done well," she said, her voice warm but firm. "This is only the beginning. Tomorrow we will perform in front of the world. Remember what we have practiced. Trust yourselves, trust each other, and move with confidence. We are making history, and I am proud to lead you." That evening, as the officers rested, Camille reflected on the journey so far. From the announcement in Paris to the first steps on London soil, every moment had been filled with challenges, learning, and growth. She understood that the coming days would be even more demanding, but she also knew that her team was ready. They had proven that with preparation, dedication, and unity, even the most daunting tasks could be accomplished. Camille looked out of the window at the illuminated palace gates, their golden accents glowing in the night. The history embedded in those walls, the centuries of tradition, and the eyes of the world all seemed to converge in that moment. She felt a deep sense of responsibility, but also a profound sense of purpose. The first-ever French gendarmerie changing of the guard at Buckingham Palace was no longer just an idea, it was becoming reality. And Camille Durand and her team were at the heart of it, ready to step into history with pride, precision, and honor. The morning of the first official rehearsal at Buckingham Palace began with an unusual quietness. A gentle drizzle fell over the palace grounds, making the stone paths slick and the air crisp. Lieutenant Camille Durand stood near the gates, watching her team prepare. There was a tension that couldn't be ignored, a mixture of anticipation and nervous energy. For weeks they had trained, practiced, and rehearsed, but today felt different. Today, everything would be tested not just by rules or technique, but by the unpredictability of real conditions. Camille walked among her officers, offering words of encouragement and checking every uniform, every polished boot, every neatly positioned hat. The French gendarmerie uniforms were impeccable, their ceremonial rifles gleaming despite the drizzle. Yet Camille knew that perfection on paper did not guarantee perfection in action. The ceremony required more than flawless appearances. It required discipline, focus, and the ability to stay composed under pressure. As they lined up for rehearsal, Camille noticed the slight tension in some faces. A few officers adjusted their hats nervously, others fidgeted with their gloves. Even the most experienced members felt the weight of the occasion. Camille reminded them, "It's normal to feel nervous. Channel it into focus. We have trained for this. Trust yourselves. Trust each other." Her words were met with nods, and slowly the nervous energy began to transform into determination. The rehearsal began. The officers stepped forward in perfect formation, rifles held firmly, eyes straight ahead. The rhythm of their steps echoed through the palace courtyard. At first, everything seemed under control, but the weather posed unexpected challenges. The rain had made the ground slippery, and a few officers struggled to maintain balance. One misstep here, one uneven pace there, and the carefully coordinated formation wavered. Camille's heart pounded as she signaled subtle corrections, guiding the team back into rhythm. Even with her steady leadership, the challenges grew. The palace grounds were expansive, and the echo of every step seemed louder than expected. Commands had to be adjusted, distances measured carefully, and timing recalibrated to match the British Guard's precise movements. Camille realized that her team was facing not only physical strain, but mental strain as well. Every officer had to remain alert, aware of every movement, every partner in formation, and every adjustment required by the environment. The pressure of performing in front of palace officials and international observers was immense. Journalists lined the sidelines, cameras clicking and recording every detail. Tourists and dignitaries watched from a respectful distance, curious to see how the French gendarmerie would handle this historic moment. Camille reminded herself that this was not just a ceremonial display, it was a performance under the scrutiny of the world. The slightest mistake would be noted, but so would excellence. She encouraged her officers to focus on execution, not fear. As the ceremony continued, small errors began to emerge. Some officers' steps were slightly off, a few salutes were just a fraction early or late. Camille's instinctive attention to detail detected each one, and she signaled minor corrections while maintaining the flow of the formation. She understood that perfection was not about never making mistakes. It was about how quickly and gracefully those mistakes were recovered. The team had practiced this, and slowly their confidence began to grow. Amid the pressure, Camille also had to manage interpersonal tensions. The intensity of the rehearsal, combined with exhaustion and nerves, led to small disagreements among the officers. A few argued quietly over positioning or pace, and some questioned whether they could truly meet the high standards expected of them. Camille stepped in, calming tempers and reminding everyone that they were a team. "Our strength is in unity," she said firmly. "Disagreement is natural, but it cannot disrupt our focus. We move forward together as one unit." The officers listened, absorbing her words. Slowly, the disagreements faded, replaced by a renewed sense of purpose. They focused on their steps, their salutes, and the rhythm of the formation. Camille could see the subtle shifts, the tighter alignment of their ranks, the steadier cadence of their march, the confidence returning to their faces. It was a reminder that leadership was not just about giving orders. It was about inspiring trust, resilience, and cooperation. As the rehearsal continued, Camille observed the British Guards. Their expressions remained neutral, but there was a subtle acknowledgement of the French officers' efforts. The differences in style were evident, yet the precision, discipline, and professionalism of the gendarmerie earned quiet respect. Camille understood that this recognition was not given lightly. It was earned through preparation, perseverance, and composure under pressure. She felt a sense of pride for her team, yet she knew that the real test was still ahead. The hours passed, and fatigue began to show. Officers' movements slowed slightly, and minor errors crept back in. Camille felt the strain herself, but she refused to allow it to affect her leadership. She signaled for a brief pause, allowing the team to rest, hydrate, and reset mentally. During the break, she spoke to each officer individually, offering encouragement, reassurance, and gentle corrections. She reminded them that endurance was as important as precision, and that maintaining focus under stress was a skill they had been training to master. After the break, the rehearsal resumed. The team moved with renewed energy, each officer mindful of every step and every gesture. The challenges of the weather, the unfamiliar terrain, and the presence of observers remained, but the officers adapted with increasing confidence. Camille watched as their movements became smoother, their alignment more precise, and their overall coordination more cohesive. She felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that their hard work and persistence were beginning to show. Yet, as the rehearsal neared its conclusion, a new challenge emerged. A sudden gust of wind scattered papers and flags near the ceremonial area, startling some of the officers. For a moment, the formation wavered, and a few officers hesitated. Camille acted quickly, signaling calm and guiding them back into position. "Stay focused," she called out. "Ignore distractions, keep your rhythm, we are in control." Her voice was steady, commanding respect and attention. The officers responded immediately, regaining composure and continuing the ceremony without further disruption. The intensity of the day highlighted a simple truth for Camille. History was never made without struggle. Every step taken on the palace grounds required more than skill. It required courage, adaptability, and determination. Each officer faced physical, mental, and emotional challenges, and each one had to rise above them. Camille recognized that these struggles were shaping her team, forging resilience and unity that would carry them through the official ceremony. By the end of the rehearsal, exhaustion was evident in every face, yet there was also a quiet pride. The officers had faced difficulties, adapted to unexpected conditions, and maintained their professionalism. Camille gathered them for a final debrief, her voice filled with both authority and warmth. "You have done well today," she said. "We faced challenges and we met them with courage and discipline. Remember this feeling. Tomorrow we step into history. Trust your training, trust your team, and trust yourselves. We are ready." That night, as the officers rested in their quarters, Camille reflected on the day's events. She thought about the unexpected challenges, the small mistakes, the moments of tension, and the ultimate triumph of their coordinated effort. She understood that the struggles they had faced were essential. They had revealed weaknesses to correct, strengths to build upon, and lessons that would carry them through the historic performance. Camille also thought about the symbolic meaning of their task. The French gendarmerie performing the changing of the guard at Buckingham Palace was more than a ceremonial event. It was a message of friendship, mutual respect, and international cooperation. Every step they took, every movement synchronized with the British Guards, was a demonstration of unity and professionalism. She felt a deep sense of responsibility to ensure that this message was delivered flawlessly. In the quiet of the evening, Camille looked at the polished boots, neatly arranged rifles, and carefully pressed uniforms of her officers. She felt a wave of gratitude for their dedication, discipline, and trust. Together, they had overcome fatigue, nerves, and unexpected challenges. Together, they were becoming not just a team, but a unit capable of making history. And in that moment, Camille Durand knew that the struggles they had endured were shaping them into something extraordinary, ready to step onto the palace grounds and perform a ceremony that the world would remember. The day of the historic ceremony had arrived, and the air around. Buckingham Palace was electric. A soft morning fog hung over the grounds, giving the grand palace an almost mystical appearance. Lieutenant Camille Durand stood at the edge of the courtyard, observing her team as they prepared. This was the moment they had trained for, rehearsed for, and dreamed about. Months of preparation had led to this day, and yet the weight of history pressed heavily on everyone's shoulders. Every officer knew that the eyes of the world were upon them. The officers moved with precision, adjusting uniforms, checking rifles, and aligning themselves into the formation that would soon be seen by dignitaries, media, and the public. Camille walked along the ranks, offering calm reassurance. "Stay focused. Trust your training." "Move as one," she whispered, her voice firm but encouraging. Even the most confident officers felt a flutter of nerves. This was unlike anything they had ever experienced. The British Guards were already in position, their expressions neutral but alert. The drums of the palace band began to play, a rhythm that echoed across the courtyard. Camille took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. The ceremony required exact timing, perfect alignment, and unwavering composure. One small mistake could disrupt the entire performance. She reminded herself that focus was everything. Panic would ruin months of preparation. As the French gendarmerie began their march onto the palace grounds, a sudden challenge arose. A scheduling miscommunication meant that the entrance of the British Guards overlapped slightly with their formation. For a tense few seconds, there was confusion. Officers hesitated, unsure of the precise steps to take. Camille's mind raced, and she signaled calmly but decisively, guiding her team back into alignment. "Recover your positions, trust your rhythm, move with confidence," she commanded. In that moment, the team responded brilliantly. The officers adjusted seamlessly, their movements flowing with the precision they had honed over countless hours of rehearsal. Camille felt a surge of pride as the formation regained its perfect alignment. This was not just skill, it was discipline, teamwork, and trust in one another. The minor disruption passed, and the ceremony continued without further incident. As the French officers marched in perfect synchronization with the British Guards, the significance of the moment became clear. Cameras clicked, dignitaries watched, and tourists gasped in awe. For the first time in history, the French gendarmerie was performing the changing of the guard at Buckingham Palace. Every step, every salute, every coordinated movement was more than a ceremonial act. It was a symbol of unity, friendship, and international respect. The pressure, however, was far from over. The palace courtyard, expansive as it was, created echoes that could throw off timing. A single misstep could disrupt the flow, and the officers were acutely aware of this. Camille moved among them subtly, signaling adjustments, and ensuring that their formation remained flawless. The officers had trained for this, but the reality of performing under the gaze of the world added a layer of intensity that no rehearsal could fully replicate. Despite the tension, the officers remained composed. Each movement reflected months of preparation, discipline, and coordination. Camille noticed the subtle confidence in their steps. The way they adjusted to the rhythm, the precision of their salutes, and the synchronization of their rifles. Every detail mattered, and the team delivered with remarkable grace. It was a testament to their dedication and to Camille's leadership. Midway through the ceremony, another challenge arose. A gust of wind swept through the courtyard, rustling flags and banners. Some officers' hats shifted slightly, and a few rifles wavered in their grip. For a split second, the formation faltered. Camille acted immediately, signaling corrections with calm authority. "Stay steady, ignore the distractions, focus on your movement and rhythm," she instructed. The officers adjusted seamlessly, their training allowing them to overcome the unexpected obstacle without losing composure. As the ceremony progressed, Camille reflected on the significance of the event. The changing of the guard was a tradition steeped in centuries of history. The British guards had performed it for generations, and now the French gendarmerie was part of that story. It was not only an honor but also a responsibility. Every movement carried meaning, every salute conveyed respect, and every step represented the pride and discipline of their nation. The officers continued their march, moving with elegance and precision. The rhythm of their steps blended harmoniously with the music of the palace band. Camille's eyes scanned the formation constantly, ensuring that every officer maintained perfect alignment. Minor adjustments were made silently through subtle signals, a language of discipline and teamwork that had been developed over weeks of practice. The team moved as one, a cohesive unit capable of performing flawlessly under immense pressure. At one point, Camille noticed a young officer, barely 20 years old, struggling slightly with the pace. His movements were hesitant, his posture tense. She stepped closer, giving a small nod and a brief word of encouragement. The officer took a deep breath, corrected his stance, and fell perfectly into rhythm. Camille felt a surge of pride, not just for his recovery, but for the unity and support that defined the team. This was more than a ceremony. It was a demonstration of trust, resilience, and shared commitment. The final moments of the ceremony were the most critical. The officers approached the center of the courtyard, where the ceremonial exchange would occur. Every step was measured, every movement synchronized with the British guards. Camille's heart raced, but she maintained her composure, guiding her team through the precise execution of the historic moment. Cameras clicked, dignitaries observed intently, and the crowd held its collective breath. When the formation reached its peak, the officers performed the synchronized salute, a gesture of respect that symbolized unity between nations. The crowd erupted in applause, and Camille felt a wave of relief and pride. The ceremony had been a success. Every challenge, every moment of doubt, every ounce of preparation had led to this historic achievement. The French gendarmerie had not only performed the changing of the guard at Buckingham Palace, they had done so with excellence, precision, and grace. As the officers marched off the palace grounds, Camille allowed herself a small smile. The weight of responsibility lifted slightly, replaced by a profound sense of accomplishment. The months of training, the countless rehearsals, and the moments of doubt had culminated in a historic performance that would be remembered for years. She knew that this ceremony was not only a personal triumph, but also a symbol of Franco-British friendship, discipline, and respect. After the ceremony, Camille gathered her team. The officers were tired but elated, their faces glowing with pride and excitement. "You have done something extraordinary today," she said, her voice filled with warmth and admiration. "This is history. Remember this moment not just for the performance, but for the unity, discipline, and teamwork that made it possible. You have represented France with honor, and I am proud to lead you." The team exchanged smiles, handshakes, and quiet words of congratulations. There was a sense of camaraderie that went beyond professional respect. It was a shared experience that would bond them for life. Camille knew that this was more than a ceremonial achievement. It was a story of perseverance, courage, and the ability to overcome challenges together. That evening, as the officers rested in their quarters, Camille reflected on the day's events. The ceremony had been flawless, but it had not been without its challenges. The weather, the unexpected gusts of wind, and the initial confusion with timing had all tested the team's focus and discipline. Yet they had adapted, overcome, and performed with excellence. Camille realized that this success was a result of preparation, leadership, and trust, not just in herself, but in every officer she had the privilege to lead. Camille also thought about the larger significance of the ceremony. The changing of the guard was more than a tradition. It was a symbol of respect, history, and unity. By participating, the French gendarmerie had contributed to a story larger than themselves, a story of international cooperation, shared values, and the power of discipline. Every step they had taken on the palace grounds was a step toward building a lasting legacy. As she looked at the team resting quietly, Camille felt a deep sense of gratitude. The officers had given their best, overcome challenges, and embraced the responsibility with courage and professionalism. Together, they had made history. And in that moment, Camille Durand knew that the first-ever French gendarmerie changing of the guard at Buckingham Palace was not just an event. It was a testament to what could be achieved through preparation, determination, and unity. The night ended with a quiet celebration, a mix of relief, pride, and reflection. Camille understood that the ceremony would be remembered not only for its historical significance, but also for the dedication, resilience, and teamwork that had made it possible. The officers had stepped into history, and they had done so with honor, precision, and grace. The morning after the historic ceremony, Buckingham Palace felt unusually quiet. The grand gates stood tall and majestic, their golden accents glinting in the early sunlight. Lieutenant Camille Durand walked slowly across the palace courtyard, reflecting on everything that had happened the previous day. The echoes of disciplined footsteps, the synchronized salutes, and the rhythm of the ceremonial drums still resonated in her mind. For months, she and her team had trained tirelessly, and now, history had been made. Yet, the significance of the event was beginning to settle in fully. Camille's team gathered in a nearby hall for a short briefing and to receive feedback from the British officials. Though the officers were physically exhausted, their faces shone with pride. Each one had contributed to a moment that would be remembered for generations. Camille felt a deep sense of satisfaction, but also humility. They had achieved something extraordinary, but it was the result of teamwork, discipline, and shared effort, not the work of a single individual. The British officers spoke first, their words formal yet warm. "Your precision and professionalism were remarkable," one of the senior guards said. "We have seen many ceremonies here over the years, but this is the first time that a foreign force has participated, and you have set a new standard. France should be proud of you." Camille felt a swell of pride, but she quickly glanced at her officers, noticing their quiet smiles and the satisfaction in their eyes. They had done it. They had earned respect on an international stage. After the briefing, Camille allowed herself a few moments of reflection. She thought about the journey from the announcement in Paris to this very moment. Months of preparation, countless rehearsals, the challenges of adapting to a new environment, and the pressure of performing in front of the world. All of it had led to this triumph. She felt gratitude for her team, for their discipline, courage, and trust. Without their dedication, none of this would have been possible. Back in Paris, word of the ceremony spread quickly. News agencies, social media channels, and newspapers celebrated the historic achievement. The French gendarmerie had not only participated in the changing of the guard at Buckingham Palace, but had done so flawlessly, earning praise and admiration from both British and international audiences. Camille's phone rang constantly with congratulations from family, friends, and colleagues. She answered each call with warmth, yet she felt that the true reward was not in recognition, but in the knowledge that they had done something historic. Camille also took time to reflect on the symbolic importance of the event. The ceremony was more than just a display of discipline. It was a demonstration of friendship and mutual respect between nations. Each step taken by the officers, each coordinated salute, and each movement synchronized with the British Guards represented more than tradition. It represented a connection, a bridge between countries, and a celebration of shared values. Camille realized that history was not only in the past. It was created in moments like this, where dedication, teamwork, and respect converged. In the days following the ceremony, the team continued to receive attention. Interviews, photographs, and invitations to speak at events highlighted their accomplishment. Camille ensured that her officers remained focused, reminding them that the honor came with responsibility. They had made history, yes, but they had also set an example for future generations. Their work was now a benchmark for excellence, demonstrating the importance of preparation, discipline, and unity. Camille also used this period to reflect on personal growth. She thought about the challenges she had faced as a leader, the responsibility of guiding a team through unfamiliar rituals, managing nerves, and ensuring flawless execution under pressure. She realized that leadership was more than giving orders. It was about inspiring confidence, supporting individuals, and creating an environment where every member felt valued and capable. The ceremony had tested her skills, patience, and resolve, but it had also strengthened her belief in the power of teamwork and trust. The team took time to visit London, exploring the city and reflecting on their achievement. They walked along the Thames, visited historic landmarks, and shared quiet moments together. Despite the excitement of sightseeing, their conversations often returned to the palace, the ceremony, and the lessons learned. They discussed the importance of preparation, the value of resilience, and the pride that comes from representing one's country with honor. These reflections deepened the bond between officers, creating friendships and memories that would last a lifetime. Camille also thought about the young officers who had faced particular challenges during rehearsals. She remembered the moments when nerves threatened to disrupt their focus, and how, with encouragement and support, each one had risen to the occasion. She realized that these moments were just as important as the ceremony itself. They had shaped confidence, resilience, and pride. Watching her team grow, adapt, and succeed was a reward that went beyond any public recognition. The ceremony had also provided lessons in humility. Despite the praise and admiration, Camille knew that perfection was a continuous journey. There were always areas to improve, small details that could be refined, and opportunities to learn from every experience. She encouraged her officers to view the historic event as a milestone, not the final destination. Excellence, she reminded them, was not a single achievement but a consistent effort to do better, to support one another, and to honor the values they represented. As the French gendarmerie prepared to return to Paris, Camille took a final walk through the palace grounds. She reflected on the history of Buckingham Palace, the centuries of tradition represented there, and the fact that her team had become part of that story. The realization filled her with pride, but also with humility. History, she thought, was not just made by leaders or institutions. It was made by ordinary people who committed themselves to excellence, courage, and integrity. In that moment, she felt grateful to have led a team that embodied those values so perfectly. Back in France, the story of their achievement became part of the national conversation. Schools, community centers, and local news outlets shared the story of the first-ever French gendarmerie changing of the guard at Buckingham Palace. Camille received letters from young cadets expressing admiration and inspiration. Parents praised the officers for representing France with dignity. The accomplishment had rippled beyond the palace grounds, inspiring others and demonstrating the importance of dedication, teamwork, and respect for tradition. Camille also spent time reflecting on the personal impact of the experience. The ceremony had tested her, challenged her, and allowed her to grow as a leader and as a person. She had learned the importance of patience, adaptability, and empathy. She had witnessed firsthand the power of unity and the strength that comes from trusting a team. And most importantly, she had seen the beauty of history being created, in real time, through careful preparation, courage, and discipline.